Thank you for being here. I thought this series was very important at this time since the vegetarian and vegan movements are growing and gaining acceptance and respect. And macrobiotics has things that are unique that can bring more value to both the vegetarian and vegan movements. And I wanted to make those things known and create a library on the SHI website, a resource. So as Macrobiotics grows, that people can find out more and more information. As many people know, I created together with some friends a definition for macrobiotics and also principles and values so people could understand really what we're about. And tonight I want to talk about common points of the world's long-standing civilization. So first of all, what does that mean? That means all of Asia, China, Japan, Korea, as well as Southeast Asia, all of India, all of the Middle East, all of Europe, North, South, East, and West, and Africa. So these are all the world's longest standing civilizations, and they all have very unique common points. And it doesn't include indigenous people or Polynesian civilization who had a different pattern. But most of the history who built large structures or developed society are part of these long-standing civilizations. So what are the common points? Well, they're all grain-based, but I'll go into that. And because they were grain-based, they all had strong family structures. So not nuclear families, but extended families. And together with that, their life was full of order and structure. By that, I mean, they not only had regular meal times and had meals together, but they had holidays, they had festivals, they had things that you could count on. And these, structure and order bring us a kind of an openness. When we know what to expect, what's coming, then they create a kind of openness and allow us, kind of give us a vitality for our life. Then, in addition to that, they all had the ability to last for many hundreds or, and in most cases, thousands of years. These are civilizations that have been around for a long time. We're 200 and some years. We're in our infancy, and these are people that have stayed on the same piece of land for a long, long time, which means that they had the ability to be harmonious with their environment. And not only harmonious, what they built was harmonious. So when you travel to any of these places, when you see the structures, what was built, there's an incredible harmony with the environment. Now, maybe you think skyscrapers are harmonious, but I think things that complement and harmonize nature are much more pleasing to my senses. So their diets, the common points were they were all grain, bean, and vegetable based, and they also had seeds, nuts, and fruits. So if we look at this, what does it mean? So right now, we're very conscious about probiotics, but probiotics, which come from pickled and fermented foods, need prebiotics. Prebiotics means fiber. The most important fiber comes from grains, beans, and vegetables, then is further complemented with seeds, nuts, and fruits. So prebiotics are food for probiotics to grow on, foods that nourish probiotics, which means all of these long-standing civilizations had this same pattern. Together with that, they had mild beverages and mild sweeteners. So this pattern is consistent no matter where you look. And so if you look at grains, then we know in the Americas, we had corn as a grain, but for Asia, the grains were rice, depending on where, short grain or long grain rice, but also barley, and millet. So barley was really the grain of Japan. Rice was the preferred grain, but most people couldn't afford to eat it, so most people ate barley. And when I went to Korea back in the 70s, all the rice there was cooked with barley at that time. So barley was prevalent in both Japan and Korea. Millet was really the grain of China. Again, rice was preferred, but most people were eating millet. Then when we go on to Europe, if we go to the UK, then we know about oats, but also barley and wheat were their grains. And so that they had, many different bread products, porridges made from barley and oats. Then throughout Europe, it depends on the area. Like in Italy, so we know about pasta in Italy, but in northern Italy, then millet was a staple. Like Leonardo da Vinci ate millet every day of his life. So in Italy, you have polenta, you have pasta, you have rice, and you have millet. In Northern Europe, you have wheat, you have barley, oats, you also have rye, and you have buckwheat. In Russia, they're famous for kasha, for buckwheat, but also barley, millet, and wheat. So the point is, throughout Europe, there were a variety of grains. In the Middle East, they ate more cracked wheat products, more bulgur and couscous. Then in Africa, Africa had a brown rice that is unique to Africa. It's not, available. It's not known in any other place. But they also ate corn, barley, millet, and wheat as their grains. And of course, in different areas, like in Ethiopia, test, so wild grasses, or in the Andes, then quinoa or quinoa. So all of the world's grains, so buckwheat, millet, rice, barley, wheat, corn, and oats, were eaten in different areas and were the mainstay. And, what concerns me a lot, when you hear people talk about vegetarian or vegan diets, then what do they say? They say, eat your fruits and vegetables. And maybe as an afterthought, they say grain. However, it's not only about nourishment. And I'm going to talk about this more in much more detail, in other webinars or seminars. It's not only nourishment. Grains have uniqueness. The uniqueness of grain is that it's adaptable. Grain can adapt to the full range of climates where food can grow. It can grow as far north as Lapland, in other words, the bottom of the Arctic Circle. Barley grows to the far, far north. It's such a hardy grain. So pretty much every place food can be grown on the planet, grain can accommodate. Plus, grain can last longer than any other food. And it's reported that wheat from Egyptian tombs, thousands of years old wheat, can still sprout. But we know from recent history, grain, if properly stored, can keep and sprout, can grow more grain for 200 to 300 years. Together with that, grain has the most balanced nutrition on the planet. But grain gives us two very important things in our life. One is it gives us resistance, physical and mental resistance. Resistance to illness, infectious and degenerative disease, but also mental resistance to resist control. And together with that, grain creates a direction in life. In other words, to have a clear direction, which is one of the things that's missing in our modern society. We don't have any direction. Everything is all over the place. There's no clarity in any area. But when we look at traditional societies, there was a cohesiveness. There was a coherency to their life, to their thinking, to what they did, to what they created. And that consistency, that coherence came from eating grain. Now, the same pattern was followed in all the world's long-standing civilizations, with one major exception, and that is Japan. Japan followed the same pattern, but where they had two additions, which are seaweeds. Now, seaweeds were also eaten in the rest of Asia, but not to the same degree as Japan. And then soy products. And again, there's soy products throughout Asia, but Japan is, I think, the most unique with miso, shoyu, and tofu, natto, soy milk. And there's a lot of controversy about soy, whether it's healthy or not, in the phytoestrogens. But the reality is that all the traditional soy products support our health in many ways and actually balance our hormonal system and actually protect us from harmful estrogens. But practically speaking, Japan has the greatest health and longevity of any country in modern times. So how do we explain that? Well, I think it's pretty easy. They followed the same pattern: grains, beans, vegetables, seeds, nuts, fruits, plus seaweeds and dairy foods. And seaweeds provide, besides providing valuable minerals and iodine, seaweeds protect us from environmental toxins, heavy metals, and radiation. And now that those things are, a concern everywhere. Then the other thing is is very interesting, because most everything that's healthy is under attack. So brown rice is under attack. The gluten grains, barley, and wheat and rye are under attack. Corn is under attack. And grains, all grains are under attack because of phytic acid. Because people are saying that phytic acid interferes with mineral absorption. However, that's a total misunderstanding. The phytic acid in grains, beans, and seeds is actually protective to our bone health and to our nervous system. And how can we prove that? Well, grain-eating people that don't eat animal and dairy foods don't have osteoporosis. They don't have the degree of dementia we have. The elders, in all the long-standing civilizations, elders are respected. They're respected for their wisdom. They're respected because they know from life's experience how to advise and guide people. Well, if they got dementia as they got older, why would they have that position of respect? But they didn't. Most of them died healthy because they had enough with life. Well, one of the main reasons is grains and phytic acid protecting not only their bones, but their nervous system. So we see these common points. So when you hear eat your vegetables and fruits, or fruits and vegetables, of course, that's very important, but we need to have order, and that order is grains, vegetables, and fruits. Now, where do beans come in? Well, in Japan, they eat very little beans. They eat azuki beans and they eat black soybeans, mainly soybeans for the most part, outside of edamame, boiled green soybeans, were fermented. They were processed soybeans. So most of their beans came from processed soybeans. Every place else had beans as a regular food, but three grains absolutely need beans to complement them. Long grain rice, so in hotter climates like India, Southeast Asia, especially India, then beans are a regular part of the diet. They need beans together with their long grain rice. People who ate cracked wheat products, bulgur and couscous, so they were complemented especially with chickpeas. Then people who ate corn and beans are a natural complement. So beans became even a stronger part in those people who ate long grain brown rice, people who ate cracked wheat products, and people who ate corn. But everyone else had a combination of grains, beans, vegetables, seeds, nuts, and fruits. Now, why pickled and fermented foods? Well, pickled and fermented foods, number one, provide preservation. Second, when we naturally ferment a food, we create nutrients that weren't there before, unique nutrients. And together with pickling and fermenting, then there was different types of drying, including sun drying. And sun drying increases or creates vitamin D the same as it does in our skin. So mushrooms are a good source of vitamin D, but especially sun-dried mushrooms. But the point is, so they ate naturally pickled and fermented foods, which created unique nutrients and a unique environment in a microbiome. Now, it's been known forever in all these places that we have two guts, especially in the Orient. The gut in our microbiome controls and regulates this other brain. So we have two brains, our microbiome and our brain that we normally consider. And our gut actually controls our nutrition, our immunity, our moods, our creativity. However, this is just a thought, and I can't really verify it, but if we're eating foods that create unique nutrients that didn't exist before for our nourishment, wouldn't we also then create unique thoughts or unique creative thoughts by eating this combination of prebiotics and probiotics? And I think the answer is yes. I can only speak from my own experience. I was a terrible student. I hated school. I couldn't sit down to read until I ate brown rice, miso soup, and vegetables, and something just clicked. And from that moment, I saw life differently. I became interested in reading. I became interested in studying. Everything became interesting. But what went along with that is discoveries. And what we find now, we have modern scientific discoveries, but all the world's long-standing civilizations had life's discoveries, wisdom, things that further our life and our well-being. Now, where do animal and dairy foods fit in with this? Because, I've heard from so many people, oh, we always ate plenty of meat, and I grew up and my parents ate plenty of meat. Well, I know my family came from the Ukraine, and they're poor, and I know they had very, very little meat, incredibly little. I mean, they lived on, on grains, beans, potatoes, and vegetables, and some eggs. But at any rate, so when I wanted to revise my book, The Complete Macrobiotic Diet, to do the latest one, I decided to do some research. And I found this really interesting document. And this is what I discovered. Before the Industrial Revolution, the average meat consumption in Europe was 5 to 10 kilograms per person per year. And this is all animal food together, 5 to 10 kilograms per person per year. That means 11 to 22 pounds per year. And most of it was for holidays and festivals in the form of roasts or stews. So a village would roast an animal, or they'd make a huge stew, and then they would eat that for days. So if you do the math, the most that could have been eaten in Europe is 3 to 4 ounces of animal food per week. That's almost nothing. That's the upper limit. But the reality is they were eating less. And that was mainly cooked in foods like beef barley stew or pork cooked with beans. It was cooked, in food. It wasn't eating a steak or a slab of meat. So even though we think we've always eaten this much animal food, we haven't. Then there were 3 exceptions that I could find: China, India, and Japan. Their average animal food consumption was 2 kilograms per person per year, 4.5 pounds. It was almost nothing. They were eating virtually no animal foods out of holidays and festivals. And Japan has no history of dairy food consumption. So again, how is that possible They were among the lowest in animal food consumption together with India and China, but they had no dairy food consumption in their history. How did they do that? Again, the answer is soy products and seaweeds. So, which brings me to the next point. Macrobiotics is not a traditional diet. It's not a traditional lifestyle. Macrobiotics is traditionally based. What that means, it's based on the traditions of these long-standing civilizations. And as I mentioned last time, indigenous and local foods were taken into account. So what they did was consistent with macrobiotic philosophy. They had a way of eating that was balanced for the environment, and they had a way of eating that didn't necessitate the eating of animal foods. And when people chose, it was really very small amounts. Now, macrobiotics is not a vegan practice, although many macrobiotic people choose to be vegan. You have that choice to follow the traditional pattern of little animal and dairy foods or none. That's really your choice. But this combination gives us the most unique nutrition, so we're able to make the choice in a healthy way. Now, what we can see in macrobiotics, because in a way the vegetarian and vegan movements are younger. So George Osawa first came to this country in 1959. Kushis were very active in the 60s, together with the Iharas and other teachers. So we have basically 60 years. So we have 3 generations. We have people like myself who got together with someone else practicing macrobiotics, and then we had kids. And most of the macrobiotic women I know ate little or no fish. They didn't really want to eat fish when they were pregnant. Some did, but most didn't. But interestingly enough, the kids were so much stronger than the parents. So my kids are stronger than me. And when I traveled, I saw the kids of all my friends. It was the same pattern. The macrobiotic kids were stronger than their parents. Now, a lot of these kids got together with someone else practicing macrobiotics, or at least someone health-oriented. And then they had kids. So that means the grandchildren are stronger than the parents. In other words, each generation is getting stronger. Now, what's unique about this? In diagnosis classes, I often divide people with people born before World War II, people born during the war, and people born after the war. And you can see that people born before World War II had much stronger constitutions. They are physically and mentally stronger in every way. They could withstand difficulties that we just can't now. People during the war were also incredibly strong. And people born after the war, baby boomers like myself, each decade is weaker and weaker. So now when you see kids that are born, they don't look like the kids when I grew up. And just think about it. When I was young, people didn't even utter the word cancer. Cancer was 1 out of 8 in 1950. At that time, people didn't even say cancer. It was the C word. It was whispered. Now, cancer is 1 out of between 2 and 3. Heart disease is 1 out of 2. Diabetes is rampant in children. Obesity is rampant in children. Arthritis, allergies, asthma. In other words, every generation now, since World War II, every decade, not generation, every decade is getting weaker and weaker and weaker until macrobiotic people, when the pattern, the trend is turning around. Each generation is getting stronger and stronger. So macrobiotics is based on these traditions from around the world of diet and lifestyle practices. So when I created the 7 steps, they're not my inventions. They're my observations of what was done before, and I tried to synthesize and put this together very carefully. So what I discovered throughout the years of my macrobiotic practice, The same pattern has existed for thousands of years, really 10 to 12,000 years since the rediscovery of agriculture. And these things have been passed on. We've inherited these things. Now it's our job to refine them, because we're not traditional people anymore, to refine them so we can make each generation stronger and stronger and rebuild a healthy humanity, which will also have natural respect for nature and the environment. And so that we can live on the same land for thousands of years like they did in Asia and Europe, Africa, every place else. So this is really what macrobiotics is about: rediscovering tradition, reinterpreting tradition, then adapting it, making it suitable for now and going into the future. Then before we end, we have our first ever annual full Macrobiotic Conference online, October 15th to the 18th. 7 teachers, 14 classes. These are master classes with macrobiotic superstars. I carefully chose the people because they would all have a unique offering to adapting and developing, refining your macrobiotic practice, helping you to get the most out of your macrobiotic practice as far as health and enjoyment and creativity. And the final thing, so Susan and I wrote the Ultimate Guide to Eating for Longevity. And I've been thinking about this a lot, because we wanted to create something that was a guidebook for what we've inherited and moving us forward to capturing these things, this order, this structure, and getting the most out of our grain, bean, vegetable-based diet. And I got this thought. So in 1946, Dr. Benjamin Spock wrote Baby and Child Care. It was a book that raised the baby boomers. You know, when I got older and I looked at my parents' book, what I discovered, Benjamin Spock's book, it raised a generation. And wouldn't you know that Dr. Spock later became macrobiotic because he was so steeped in practicality and common sense, and macrobiotics spoke to him. So for the latter part of his life, he did practice macrobiotics. And so in thinking, so what's the comparison? Well, the Ultimate Guide to Eating for Longevity is really a book for our generation to guide people back to health. How to get the most, not only of your macrobiotic practice, but your vegetarian and vegan practice. And other times people have sent in questions. So if we can just take a few minutes, if there's any questions, I'd like to open up because it's such an important topic. Maybe just take 5 minutes. If anyone has questions, try to answer them. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Denny, for that. So just as he says, if anyone has any questions about anything that was discussed during tonight's webinar, or any general questions that are not related to any counseling issues of any sort, feel free. I just opened up the chat. We have about 5 minutes, or maybe you can just physically raise your hand, or we also have a raise hand feature that Zoom utilizes. I will just have to unmute you. So if anyone has a question, just let me know, and we'll address as many as we can within that 5-minute time. Marielle, it looks like. Okay. So I'm going to unmute you, and you can either type or you can ask your question out loud. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much, Danny. First, I live in Florida now, but I used to live in Philadelphia, and I used to go to a scene market and was.
Great.
My question, Danny, was that if you could speak just a little bit more about what you mean by order and structure in the macrobiotic diet. And I'm sorry, I might have to mute myself because of my little dog, but order and structure, it is about discipline, and I'm gonna mute myself, okay?
No. Order and structure means nature is orderly. We have day follows night. There's an orderly progression of the seasons. There's an orderly progression of the moon. And that gives rise to order and structure in our life. So regular meal times, then respect and adjustment to the season, as well as celebration of holidays, as well as nature, appreciating and respecting nature where all of these things come from. And the same as everyone thrives on order and structure, just like children, when they have an orderly life, when they have the right type of discipline, they thrive. And when children are just left to be loose, they don't. So one of the things that's missing in modern life is this order and structure. And what's unique about our macrobiotic practice, because so many people think, well, macrobiotics is about food, the macrobiotic diet, but it's not. Macrobiotics is a lifestyle, and the order and structure bring life and new meaning to our food and cooking and lifestyle. So, yeah.
All right, thank you. We have another question. Vicky, I'm going to unmute you right now, or I'm asking to unmute. You just have to click that button.
Good evening. Denny, I did hear about the prebiotics. You mentioned fiber and you indicated the grains, the fruits, the beans, but you mainly said grains, fruit, and veggies. But either my mind just went to sleep real quick, but I didn't hear about the probiotics.
Okay, so probiotics, which are, in everybody's mind, are naturally pickled and fermented foods. Miso, shoyu, sauerkraut, kimchi, natural vinegars, unyielded sourdough bread, and natural, good high quality alcohol. They're all naturally either pickled or fermented foods, and they are the probiotics.
Okay.
Then prebiotics means fiber. Fiber, especially in grains, beans, and vegetables, but also in seeds, nuts, and fruits. So the combination of fiber together are the prebiotics, which is food for the probiotics.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that explanation.
You're welcome. Maybe one more question, if anybody has it.
If we have time for maybe one more question for an individual who maybe didn't have an opportunity, either you can send it directly to the chat or raise your hand. And if not, we can maybe wrap up. So I'll just take a look. All right, looks like Vicky, you have another question? Okay, one more question for Vicky, and then we will wrap up afterwards. Just going to unmute you again.
Okay. You mentioned we had two guts, the microbiome. I can't even read my writing. Microbiome. And what was the other one?
And so our brain processes vibrations, images, and thoughts. Our gut, our digestive system, processes liquid.
Okay.
So, but we have two brains. Our main brain really is our microbiome, our gut, which regulates and controls and develops our brain, which we normally think of. So what's missing today is a healthy gut for most people. And also, that's the secret to immunity. If people had a healthy microbiome, would be no pandemic. No one would care.
Right.
Healthy germs protect you from unhealthy germs, whether it's bacteria or viruses or other things. So, yeah.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. So, thank you very much for being here. I appreciate your participation and the opportunity to express these things.
Once again, thank you, everyone. We appreciate you for being here tonight, and have a good evening.
Bye, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.